Have you ever felt that sinking feeling when you look at your paycheck and see how much vanished before the money even reached your account? You work overtime, sacrifice time with family, push through exhaustion, and then watch 25%, 30%, sometimes 40% of your earnings disappear into something called withholding. Meanwhile, you read headlines about billionaires paying lower tax rates than their secretaries, corporations getting massive refunds after record profits, and trillions hidden in offshore accounts. You probably thought, well, that's just how sophisticated finance works. If I were smarter, maybe I'd benefit too. You blamed yourself for not understanding the complexity, for not having better accountants, for not being financially literate enough. But what if I told you that the confusion you feel, the complexity that makes your head spin, the guilt about wanting to keep more of what you earned, what if all of that was engineered exactly this way? What if the modern tax system isn't a neutral mechanism for funding public goods, but rather a sophisticated wealth extraction apparatus designed to ensure that those who work for their money pay, while those who own for their money don't? What if that feeling of being trapped in a system that feels personal but operates against your interests was the intended outcome? My name is Pig, and I spend way too much time studying how systems of power actually operate, the hidden mechanisms that transfer wealth from many to few, the psychological techniques that make exploitation feel voluntary, and the legal frameworks that make it all seem normal. The tax system represents one of the most brilliant examples of this. A structure so complex that it requires expert interpretation, so embedded that it feels inevitable, and so morally loaded that questioning it feels unpatriotic. This isn't about how to pay less tax, it's about understanding the game itself. If you want to understand the real mechanisms being deployed instead of just accepting the official story about civic duty and fair share, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Because what I'm about to show you will fundamentally change how you see every paycheck, every April deadline, and every political debate about tax reform. The documents don't lie, and the money trail is crystal clear. Here's what they tell you about taxation. It's the price we pay for civilization. The government needs revenue to build roads, fund schools, maintain defense, provide social services, and keep society functioning. The textbook explanation presents a progressive system where those who earn more pay a higher percentage, ensuring fairness and redistribution from those with the broadest shoulders to those who need support. Economists will tell you that taxation corrects market failures, provides public goods that private markets won't supply, and maintains economic stability. On paper, this system exists to pool our resources for collective benefit, with everyone contributing according to their ability to pay. The narrative continues with different tax brackets, deductions to incentivize beneficial behavior, and complexity, because modern economies are complex. The EARS exists to collect what's legally owed and ensure compliance. When wealthy individuals or corporations pay less, we're told they're using legal tax strategies available to everyone, they're just more sophisticated about it. The system may need reform, but fundamentally it's a democratic mechanism where elected representatives set rates and rules reflecting our collective values. Sounds reasonable, right? A necessary system for funding the common good. But if that's the whole truth, then explain this. Why does the average American spend 13 hours and $240 annually just to figure out what they owe, while the ultra-wealthy pay specialists millions to ensure they owe almost nothing? According to the Institute on Taxation and Economic Policy, at least 55 of America's largest corporations, including Amazon, Nike, and FedEx, paid zero federal income tax in 2020 on combined profits exceeding $40 billion. If the system is about everyone contributing fairly, why does a 2021 White House Council of Economic Advisors study show that the wealthiest 400 billionaire families paid an average federal individual income tax rate of just 8.2% between 2010 and 2018? That's less than many public school teachers or firefighters pay. Why does the EARS audit low-income families claiming the earned income tax credit at rates 5 times higher than everyone else, while audit rates for millionaires dropped 72% since 2011? There's a massive gap between the official story and the actual outcomes. Let me show you what's actually happening behind that gap. Here's what the art of taxation actually is: a deliberately engineered dual-track system that punishes labor income while systematically protecting and amplifying capital wealth. This isn't a bug in the system, it's the primary feature. The extraction mechanism operates on a principle known in elite financial circles as buy, borrow, die. Here's exactly how wealth flows away from you and stays with them. The accumulation phase: the wealthy don't earn income like you do. They acquire appreciating assets, stocks, real estate, art, businesses. As these assets grow in value, that growth is called unrealized gains. According to the tax code, unrealized gains are invisible. They don't exist for tax purposes, no matter how many billions they represent. Instead of selling assets, which would trigger taxable events, they visit banks and borrow against their portfolios at incredibly low interest rates. This debt provides cash for mega yachts, mansions, political influence, and more investments. Here's the brilliant part: debt isn't taxable income. In fact, the interest on that debt can often be written off as a business expense. When they die, the step-up in basis rule resets their heirs' cost basis to current market value. Decades of accumulated capital gains tax liability simply vanishes. Their children inherit billions with zero tax consequences. Follow the money trail and the pattern becomes crystal clear. According to heirs data analyzed by economists Emmanuel Saez and Gabriel Zuckman, the effective tax rate for the 400 wealthiest American families dropped from 70% in 1950 to 23% in 2018, lower than the bottom half of American households, who pay around 25% when including all federal, state, and local. Taxes: think of it like a casino, where you must pay the house 30% of every chip you win, but VIP players can print their own chips, borrow against printed chips, and leave without ever cashing out, passing the chips tax-free to their children. The official purpose is public funding. The actual function is dynastic wealth preservation through a system that acts as a sieve, catching W-2 wage earners every time while providing perfectly sized holes for the asset holding class. This playbook has been refined over more than a century, and the pattern reveals itself when you trace the evolution. In 1913, when the 16th Amendment established federal income tax, it was sold as a class tax affecting fewer than 4% of the population, only the very wealthy. The top marginal rate was 7% on income above $500,000, equivalent to $15 million today. The pitch was simple: tax the wealthy to fund government without burdening working families. By 1918, World War I had pushed the top rate to 77%. But here's the crucial development. The Revenue Act of 1918 introduced the capital gains preference, taxing investment income at lower rates than wages. That distinction between earned and unearned income became the foundation of the entire extraction mechanism. The 1920s brought the first major reversal. Treasury Secretary Andrew Mellon, one of America's wealthiest men, led the charge to reduce top rates from 77% to 25% by 1925. Congressional investigations later revealed that Mellon's own tax returns showed he paid an effective rate of 2.6% through elaborate but legal avoidance schemes. The pattern was established: those who control wealth also control the conversation about how wealth should be taxed. World War II introduced the modern withholding system, a critical psychological evolution. Before 1943, Americans paid taxes annually in lump sums. The current Tax Payment Act of 1943 introduced payroll withholding. And here's why this matters. When taxes are automatically deducted, workers experience them as money they never had, rather than money being taken. This psychological shift made high taxation politically sustainable even as rates reached 94% on top earners. Notice the pattern. Labor income became automatically withheld and highly visible on pay stubs, while capital income remained self-reported and psychologically distant. By the 1950s, despite a 91% top marginal rate, economist Thomas Piketty's research shows effective rates for the wealthy were far lower due to deductions, shelters, and preferential capital gains treatment. The 1980s brought Reagan's tax revolution, cutting the top rate from 70% to 28%, while eliminating many deductions for ordinary taxpayers. The Tax Reform Act of 1986 was sold as simplification, but the records show corporate lobbying expenditures increased 300% in the 5 years leading up to the bill, and the final legislation contained 650 special provisions, each negotiated by specific industries to protect specific advantages. Today's version is simply more sophisticated. The 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act created the Qualified Business Income Deduction, allowing pass-through business owners to deduct 20% of their income, worthless to wage earners but worth millions to wealthy business owners. According to the Joint Committee on Taxation, 61% of this benefit flows to the top 1% of earners. The pattern remains consistent across eras, complexity increases, labor is taxed transparently and heavily, capital is taxed opaquely and lightly. Here's how they weaponize your own psychology against you, making you complicit in a system designed to extract from you while protecting others. The tax system brilliantly exploits multiple cognitive biases simultaneously. Authority bias makes you assume that official government forms and complex regulations must be legitimate and necessary. When humans see Ayer's letterhead and penalty threats, we automatically think this must be fair rather than this might be designed to benefit some at others' expense. Behavioral economists have documented loss aversion. We feel losses roughly twice as intensely as equivalent gains. The withholding system exploits this by making tax payments automatic losses from paychecks, while refunds feel like gains even though they're literally your own money returned after an interest-free loan to the government. According to research in the Journal of Economic Psychology, 75% of Americans receive refunds averaging $2,800 and report feeling happy about it, despite giving the government that free loan. Complexity bias is weaponized through the tax code's 6,871 pages, plus 75,000 pages of regulations. This isn't accidental complexity, it's strategic. As former EARS Commissioner Charles Rosati testified to Congress, the complexity of the tax code serves specific constituencies. When you can't understand the system, you can't effectively challenge it, and you assume successful navigation requires superior intelligence rather than structural advantages. Here's the engineered emotional journey, and notice how each emotion serves the system's continuation. It begins with civic duty and patriotism. You're taught that paying taxes is your responsibility as a citizen, funding schools, roads, and defense. This creates hope and pride. You're contributing to something larger. That emotional foundation makes you vulnerable to the investment phase, where you defend taxation in debates and internalize the moral framework the system promotes. Then comes confusion and doubt. You attempt your own taxes and realize you might be making costly mistakes. You hear about deductions you didn't know existed. This doubt drives deeper investment. You pay for premium software, hire accountants, spend hours researching. Each dollar an hour invested makes you more committed to believing the system is legitimate, because admitting it's rigged means admitting you've been played. Realization comes gradually. You discover wealthy people use strategies unavailable to you. You learn about corporations paying zero while you owe thousands. You see politicians who wrote tax codes retire to lucrative positions at benefiting firms. This could lead to anger and action, but here's the final manipulation: shame. The system reframes your inability to minimize taxes as personal failure. You didn't get the right education, hire the right advisors, start the right business. Your exploitation becomes your fault, and shame keeps you quiet. The tax system atomizes collective experience into individual shame. When you owe money in April, you don't discuss it. When you can't afford professional help, you don't admit it. When forms confuse you, you feel stupid rather than angry. According to 2019 Pew Research, 72% of Americans feel stressed about taxes, but only 23% discuss tax situations with others beyond casual complaints. This silence is engineered through privacy norms and individualized enforcement. You receive personalized letters threatening you specifically. There's no collective notice saying we're targeting your entire community. The experience feels personal and isolating, preventing recognition that your struggle is nearly universal among wage earners. while the wealthy operate in networks sharing tax optimization strategies. When you think you're alone, you don't organize resistance or demand structural change. You just try to survive individually, exactly what the system requires. Let me show you 3 specific documented examples revealing exactly how this extraction mechanism operates. In June 2021, ProPublica obtained IRS data revealing how America's wealthiest individuals navigate taxation. The document showed that between 2014 and 2018, the 25 richest Americans saw their wealth increase by $401 billion while paying $13.6 billion in federal income taxes, a true tax rate of 3.4%. Specifically, Jeff Bezos paid 0 federal income tax in 2007 and 2011 despite his wealth growing by billions. Elon Musk paid 0 in 2018. George Soros paid 0 for 3 consecutive years. How? Their income was offset by losses and deductions, while their actual wealth grew through unrealized asset appreciation. The money trail is clear. According to SEC filings, these individuals borrowed hundreds of millions against their stock portfolios to fund lavish lifestyles. The loans aren't taxable income, the interest is often deductible, and the underlying assets continue appreciating tax-free. Meanwhile, according to IRS data, the average American household earning $70,000 paid an effective federal rate of 14%. Amazon reported $5.6 billion in U.S. profits in 2017 and $11 billion in 2018. According to SEC filings, the company paid 0 federal income tax both years and received a $129 million rebate in 2018. The Institute on Taxation and Economic Policy analyzed the mechanisms: $1.4 billion in R&D tax credits, $1.1 billion in stock-based compensation deductions, and accelerated depreciation on equipment. These aren't illegal loopholes, they're intentional provisions. OpenSecrets.org shows Amazon spent $14.2 million on federal lobbying in 2017 and $14.4 million in 2018, employing 83 lobbyists including former congressional staffers and Treasury officials. The return on investment, saving approximately $2.5 billion in taxes, a 17,000% ROI on lobbying expenditures. Private equity managers receive carried interest, typically 20% of fund profits, taxed as capital gains 20% rather than ordinary income 37%. Congressional testimony reveals this distinction is purely semantic. Managers contribute minimal personal capital but receive massive compensation for managing others' money. The lobbying trail is documented. The Private Equity Council spent $6.9 million in 2007 alone, mobilizing 53 lobbying firms when Congress proposed closing this loophole. The Joint Committee on Taxation estimated in 2015 that elimination would generate $15.6 billion over 10 years, money effectively subsidized by wage earners whose compensation faces full taxation. Let's aggregate these cases into systemic scale. According to the Tax Justice Network, the United States loses $163 billion annually to tax avoidance and evasion, $113 billion from corporate profit shifting, and $50 billion from individual offshore structures. Waller text annual lost revenue code 163 IText billion dollars. Over a decade, this compounds to $1.63 trillion, enough to eliminate all student loan debt, $1.7 trillion, while fully funding universal pre-K, $35 billion annually. That's the opportunity cost of the current extraction mechanism. But the scale goes deeper. When you include all taxes, federal, state, local, the system's regressivity becomes stark. The Institute on Taxation and Economic Policy found the bottom 20% of Americans pay 11.4% of income in state and local taxes, while the top 1% pay just 7.4%. Combined with federal taxation, the total burden flattens dramatically. Text bottom 60%, NIDE 15.4%, text tax federal plus 10.1%, text tax state local SARS 35.5%, text tax total dollar. NIDE's 30.3%, text tax federal plus 7.4%, text tax state local SARS 37.7%, text tax total dollar. However, this ignores the crucial factor: wealth versus income taxation. The ultra-wealthy derive economic gains from asset appreciation, unrealized capital gains that aren't taxed at all. Research by economists Lazarson and Yagin shows that, including unrealized gains, the true tax rate for the 400 wealthiest Americans drops to 8.2%. The human reality: if you earn $60,000 and pay 25% total taxes, you're left with $45,000. If someone's wealth increases by $60 billion and they pay 8.2%, they keep $55.1 billion. Their effective rate on wealth accumulation is lower than yours on survival income. Here's why this system doesn't get fixed despite widespread frustration and clear inequity. The institutions designed to oversee tax policy are controlled by those who benefit from current structures. The Treasury's Office of Tax Policy consistently cycles personnel between government and major corporate law firms. Mark Mazur served as Assistant Secretary for Tax Policy under Obama after working at PricewaterhouseCoopers, then returned to PwC. David Cotter held the same role under Trump after careers at RSM and Ernst & Young, then returned to private sector advisory work. Campaign finance connections are direct. According to OpenSecrets.org, House Ways and Means and Senate Finance Committee members received $89 million in 2020 election contributions, with financial services and real estate as top donors, the same industries benefiting most from preferential tax treatment. Tax policy debates are shaped by institutions funded by beneficiaries of current structures. The Tax Foundation, frequently cited as neutral, received $1.4 million from Koch-affiliated foundations between 2013-2019. The American Enterprise Institute lists major corporations as funders while advocating for corporate tax cuts. Media ownership concentration means debates occur within narrow bounds. 6 corporations control 90% of American media, and those corporations benefit from current tax structures. You'll see debates about whether top rates should be 37% or 39.6%, but not about why income is taxed at 37% while capital gains are taxed at 20%. Laws aren't written with accidental loopholes. They're designed to enable extraction while maintaining fairness appearances. The step-up in basis rule allows dynastic wealth to pass between generations largely untaxed. Opportunity zones provide tax benefits averaging $1.7 million per investor with minimal community benefit requirements. Enforcement protects perpetrators. EAR's audit rates for millionaires dropped from 8.4% in 2010 to 2.4% in 2019, while low-income EETC audit rates remained at 5%, higher than any other group. Complex tax avoidance goes unpursued while automated enforcement targets the vulnerable. Now that you understand the blueprint, you can spot it everywhere, and that awareness itself disrupts their business model. Watch for complexity as a weapon. Any system requiring expensive professional interpretation likely advantages those who can afford that interpretation. When politicians promise tax simplification while codes keep growing, recognize that complexity serves specific interests. Follow lobbying money through OpenSecrets.org. When industries spend millions on tax policy, they're purchasing favorable treatment worth far more. Before accepting tax policy arguments, check who funds the organizations making them. Notice who bears revenue neutrality burdens. Tax reform proposals invariably cut provisions benefiting ordinary taxpayers while protecting capital gains preferences and corporate breaks. Recognize moral framing manipulation. Tax burden compared to what? Do workers creating products deserve less consideration than passive capital owners? Historical examples prove exposure forces change. The alternative minimum tax emerged in 1969 after revelation that 155 high-income Americans paid zero taxes. The Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act followed UB's whistleblower exposures. Current pressure points include the IRS enforcement gap, the $600 billion annual difference between owed and collected taxes. Structural changes have majority support when clearly explained: mark-to-market taxation of unrealized gains for ultra-wealthy, step-up basis elimination, carried interest treatment as ordinary income. The barrier isn't public opposition, it's public ignorance of current law operations. Maximize legal deductions available to wage earners, retirement contributions, health savings accounts, education expenses. These provisions exist. Use them without shame. Build community knowledge sharing through VITA programs and mutual aid networks. Support investigative journalism exposing tax avoidance. Organizations like ProPublica provide. The Art of Taxation reveals the core principle, systems appearing neutral and meritocratic while systematically extracting from labor to capital. The same pattern appears in healthcare pricing, student loan structures, housing financialization, and retirement insecurity. Understanding taxation's blueprint helps recognize extraction mechanisms everywhere. You're no longer a mark accepting complexity as inevitable and blaming yourself for struggling with incomprehensible systems. You're an informed observer who can see the blueprint, recognize beneficiaries, follow money trails, and understand that your frustration isn't personal failure, it's rational response to structural extraction. The tax system is designed by humans and can be redesigned by humans, but redesign requires enough people understanding how it currently works, who it serves, and why that's neither inevitable nor acceptable. That understanding starts with conversations like this, with awareness that refuses to accept that's just how it works as an answer. The documents don't lie, the money trail is clear, the pattern is consistent. Now you can see it, and you can help others see what you now see. Systems designed by humans can be redesigned by humans, but only when we stop playing by rules written to ensure we lose.